Okay, so we are in part 5 now, Zechariah chapter 2. We're going to be looking tonight at verses 8 through 13. We'll do a little review to start off with. Not a very easy vision. None of these visions are easy to interpret. So I'd like to take a little extra time, do a little review so people can understand also some of the things that we've talking about. Don't want to create any controversy. Uh, uh, where it says angel and all that. So I want to help you with that as well and give you a little understanding on that. So we're in chapter 2, Zechariah, verses 8 through 13. We're in Zechariah's third vision. So what we are looking at these 8 visions, and we're looking at 8 visions of Zechariah all the way to chapter 6. And we constantly run into visions of angels. So far, this is what we've seen. And we've discussed from previous lessons that the angels are the Hebrew word malach. And this word can mean angel, like a created angel, such as one of those, or it can simply mean a messenger, which could even refer to God, like angel of the Lord, be messenger of the Lord, found in Scripture. It can even mean man. There's a good uh, there is a good example that where you have the angel to the church of Ephesus or the angel church of Smyrna, and a lot of expositors think that that could possibly even mean pastor, like somebody like me. But basically, being an angel, and so created angel can be a messenger, could refer to God, or even a man. In this context that we read in Zechariah, these angels rep. Oh, can you if you're unmuted, can I ask you just to mute, just if you would please? That would be a big help. Okay. So in this context, we read in Zechariah, these angels represent the triune God and give us his future purpose for Zechariah's nation and the world. So Hebrews chapter 1, we're looking at just as a reference about angels. Okay, to which of the, and then I put in parentheses here, created. That's just the Greek word is angelos, angels. That's where we get the word angels from, and it comes from the Greek. Interesting. So to which of the angels said he at any time, sit on my right hand until I make thine enemies thy footstool? Are they not all ministering spirits sent forth to minister to them who shall be heirs of salvation? So angels' purpose are to minister. That's their whole purpose. Is what God created them to minister, to serve. And I find that to be great. I think interesting, of course. That's their purpose. So they minister a message. And remember, it was angels who announced the birth of Christ. So angels have been used. They also appeared to Cornelius. An angel appeared to him with a message. And there are other times when angels would appear. Daniel had Gabriel actually come and give him a message. So angels do minister a message. We find that there. And so in the visions of Zechariah, though, the angels are ministering a message, but their identity is covered or it's shrouded. So we can recognize through their messages and attributes, start looking at these quote unquote angels, and then you start seeing attributes that it would definitely be God shining through. And so I find that interesting. So in the third vision, Zechariah meets a man. Okay, so I'm going to go into this vision, just start off so you see the whole thing. He meets this man with a measuring line, and he asks the man where he is going. Where are you going? And the man tells him that he's going to measure Jerusalem. And by doing so, he's signifying God's eternal ownership of Jerusalem. The man leaves Zechariah, but before he is out of sight, he is stopped by another man. Now, these men are now described as angels. First of all, talked about, he said he's a man. You see that there in scripture when you start the chapter 2. And then all of a sudden they're described as angels. The man is stopped by the other man, and then he is commanded, this other man commands him to run back to Zechariah with a message. He says, go back, I've got a message for Zechariah. So the angel that stopped the man with the measuring line, he speaks in the first person as Jehovah God. And this is a very unique passage. I don't believe there's another passage quite like this. For I saith, I saith the Lord. He's just like speaking in the first person. And then his prophecy details the following points. First point is that Jerusalem will be filled with people and prosperity. So he says, listen, Jerusalem's going to be filled with so many people, it will overflow the walls, and there will be cattle. And so this is a symbol of prosperity, but there will be no more need for walls someday. That's what he's saying. And the walls, of course, are walls of defense. And so Zechariah, of course, would be shaking his head and thinking, well, that's just impossible, because we're a humble people. We don't have many of us. We're surrounded by enemies. We're taken over by the Persians. How on earth could Jerusalem someday, this city, be so large, so many people, that it overflows the walls and there's no need more for defense anymore, which he couldn't imagine with all the attacks that go on. And we find that in the book of Nehemiah, actually, that there were marauding bands of different groups coming through and attacking Jerusalem through the years. And so he just can't imagine that. That's just not possible, but it is. And then he said, Jehovah, this angel is speaking and in the first person, but it's not an angel. It's shrouding God. And it says that Jehovah would be a wall of defense. Remember, this is a vision. And he would be a wall of defense and will dwell in the middle of the city. Okay, so he says, I'm going to defend the outside of the city as a wall. And I'm also going to live in the middle of the city. Now, even in the time of Solomon, God dwelt in the Holy of Holies in the temple. But what we're looking at is a different thing. This is completely different. This pictures God having a proactive voice in his kingdom. He's actually there. This is the way the scripture is going here. It says, I'm going to be in the midst of the people. I'm going to be there. And you'll see that as this vision unfolds. And so this is definitely a reference to the millennial reign of Christ and beyond. This is his kingdom, the kingdom of God. And this hasn't happened yet. In verses 6 through 7, the messenger now goes back to Zechariah's day and commands the Jews to leave Babylon. Remember, he says, you need to go. You need to get out of Babylon. Do not stay. And so now he's going back, he goes way into the future. Now he's going back into the present again. And by then, many Jews were, so he's saying, leave Babylon. But remember, Babylon is now under the Persian power. And many Jews were living in Babylon at the time in peace and prosperity due to the peaceful and powerful reign of the Persians. Yet there was a sinister draw of idolatry, and we talked about materialism last week, that was pulling the people away from the service of God. And so this was the danger. And then also there would come a day when Persia would fall and the Greeks would come in and they would wipe them out, and they wouldn't care if you were Jewish or Persian or anyone. They'd just kill you. And so that was the danger. Thankfully, we find that there were Jews, and they heard this message. They heeded Zechariah's message, and they did return to Israel. Now, I've been studying through the book of Ezra, and I've discovered there are two notable caravans. One would be Ezra himself was 6,000. That happened in 458 BC. Of course, what we're looking at in the book of Zechariah is about 520 BC, 520 to 512 BC. And Nehemiah was a smaller group in about 445 BC. So those were the two caravans that we know about in the Bible of groups. But we also need to keep in mind that there was a constant trickle of returning Jews. Yet the sad truth is that most did not heed Zechariah's message, and they stayed in Babylon. Many of these people who stayed eventually lost their identity as Jews altogether. So they would intermarry, then many times they would just get enveloped into the paganism of Babylon and Persia, and they would lose their identity. And then, after 3 or 4 generations, it would be gone. And so they need to leave. They need to get back to their land. They need to carry on as a nation. They need to continue on with their national identity. This is the warning in verses 6 through 7. So now we're gonna continue into verse 8 now. Now that we've looked at the first part of this vision itself. And so now he continues to see, this man continues to speak, or this angel, this is actually the Lord of hosts. Notice what it says here. And this is interesting. This is interesting because it's almost like when you get to verse 8, it's like he changes his identity. Of course, Jesus said, I am in the Father and the Father's in me. And so once again, a vision. For thus saith the Lord of hosts. Now, if you look up the Lord of hosts and define Lord of hosts, it means Jehovah of the heavenly armies. That's what that means. So whenever you see Lord of hosts, you can just chalk it down to Jehovah of the heavenly armies. So he's speaking in a military way, as a general would, and as a commander would of a great army. And he does have a great army, a spiritual army. Angelic army. Okay. And he says, so thus saith the Lord of hosts, after the glory hath he sent me unto the nations which spoiled you. So who was sent? See, this is why I'm saying all of a sudden it's almost like this angel changes identity. At first he was speaking in the first person as the Father, and now he's speaking as Christ, which I just find this so interesting. After the glory hath he sent me unto the nations which spoiled you. For he that toucheth you touches the apple of his eye. And so, of course, he's referring to Zechariah, but he's also referring to, when he says you there, he's referring to all of the nation Israel. So now the messenger is reminding the people. See, this is what he's doing is, he that toucheth you, he's saying, touches the apple of his eye. What he's doing there is he's reminding the people of the Abrahamic Covenant. So the Abrahamic Covenant, this is a reminder. Verse 8 there is a reminder of the Abrahamic Covenant. You touch the people, you're touching me. And so let's look into the Abrahamic Covenant for a moment so you can understand it. Genesis chapter 12, this is the first time the Abrahamic Covenant is mentioned. And of course, the Lord speaking to Abraham, the Lord said unto Abram, and which became Abraham, get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred and from thy father's house unto a land that I will show thee. And I will make thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and I will make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee, and in thee shall all the families of the earth be blessed. And this last part is talking about the millennial reign of Christ. That's a reference to the millennial reign of Christ. And I want you to notice, I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curse thee. So you touch the people, you touch Zechariah's people, you're touching him, and you're touching him in a very sensitive way. That's what he's saying there. And this is the Abrahamic Covenant. Bless them that bless thee, curse them that curse thee. So notice also the prophesying angel is speaking in a submissive role to Jehovah or the Father's will. And this is what I've been talking about. He is now speaking in the person of Christ. As we see, this is so interesting. But it underscores the importance of the message over the identity of the messenger. Messenger isn't important. What's important is the message. Okay? I'm talking about the actual shrouded thing that he's seen in this vision. Okay, I don't know how to describe this, but these messengers are simply manifested voices for God. That's what they are. And I think about that. That's what God needs. He needs voices. I'm not important. What's important is the message, not the person who's given the message. Well, I'm important in the fact that God saved my soul and I'm going to be in heaven. But when it comes to my service, when it comes to the message itself, the message is more important than me. The message is what I need to get out. And I remember my pastor years ago say, just be a voice. Just be a voice. He says, who am I? He says, I'm a voice. That's all I want to be. Remember, that's what John the Baptist said. He said, well, who are you? He says, I'm a voice of one crying in the wilderness. That's who I am. Doesn't matter. So are you this? Are you that? He says, I'm a voice. I'm a voice. And I like that. That these angels, quote unquote, are voices, and they're speaking as a sort of a conduit, and God is speaking through them, and it's just very interesting. So, is the Abrahamic Covenant, and there's some people that don't believe, there are Christians out there that are saying that it is no longer relevant in our day for the Jewish nation. Is it still relevant in our day for the Jewish nation? Yes or no? Well, if you go to chapter 17, verse 7, and there are other passages, but for the sake of time, I'm not going to do all the passages. But here it is in Genesis 17, verse 7, it says, and I will establish my covenant between me and thee. It's again, he's talking to Abraham, and thy seed after thee and their generations for an everlasting covenant. Now, how long is an everlasting covenant? Well, it never ends. It's everlasting. And notice it says to be a God unto who? Thee. And so who is that referring to? Is that referring to Abraham himself? Yes. It's also referring to, notice the last phrase there, and to thy seed after thee. So the seed of Abraham, the children of Abraham. The Abrahamic covenant was given to the Jewish nation as an everlasting covenant. An everlasting covenant is a covenant that cannot be broken. The Mosaic covenant could be broken, but the Abrahamic covenant can never be broken. Okay? And there's a lot of expositors that get the Mosaic covenant confused with the Abrahamic covenant. And that's why we have a lot of problems today with theology. The Abrahamic covenant is an everlasting covenant. It says it right there in Genesis 17, verse 7. And it also says, and to thy seed after thee, children of Abraham, as an everlasting covenant. So the Abrahamic covenant is based on God's choice, and it's based on his grace. And I love that, because you see, the fact that God will save anyone, he made a choice to give us eternal life. We come to him and we ask him for mercy. We ask him for salvation. He could say no, but God didn't do that. He said, anyone who comes to me, I will accept. Whosoever will, let them freely come. And so God made a choice to accept everyone into his covenant. And the Abrahamic covenant in the Old Testament was also God's choice to choose a family, a nation. And some people don't like that. Well, you're not God. So God can make his own choices about things. He is God. And I think people need to let God be God. He will bless Israel, but he will do it his way and will follow his plans to make it possible. It will not be my decision. It will not be anyone else's decision. It's God's choice and it's his way. Verse 8 again. Let's look at it again. For thus saith the Lord of hosts, after the glory hath he sent me unto the nations which spoiled you. For he that toucheth you toucheth the apple of his eye. Now we can apply this to his day, to Zechariah's day. I mean, God will fight for his nation and his people. The most venerable human organ, or vulnerable, sorry, not venerable. I got that wrong. It's an E and it's supposed to be a U. Okay, so the most vulnerable, venerable human organ is the eye. To touch the people would cause great pain and discomfort. A nation that opposes God's people physically, like Israel, or spiritually, like those who are born again, touches God in his most sensitive area. So if somebody messes with me as one of his children, it's like God being poked in the eye. And I don't know about you, but if somebody pokes me in the eye, I'm not going to be happy. Okay. And I'm just, a man. But imagine how God would feel. He will bring his hammer down on those who persecute his people. That's what he's saying. He's saying, listen, anybody messes with you, Zechariah, it's like they're poking me in the eye, and they're poking me right in the pupil. And that hurts. That's a sensitive area. And I'm going to come down on those people. So just be aware of that. And so what would that be? I mean, if somebody comes to me, like, let's say there's a big bodyguard that knocks on my door and says, I'm going to sit outside your house and I'm going to watch your house day and night. And if anybody messes with you, I'll take care of them. Oh man, I've got a bodyguard. He's going to take care of me. Anybody messes with me, he just pounds them. That's comforting. I don't have that, by the way. But I have something better. I've got the Lord, and he takes care of me. And listen, the Bible talks about if somebody wants to hurt me, maybe they can take my life, but they cannot touch my soul. And God will bring his equalizer out eventually, and they'll find out to their detriment. All right, verse 9. It's a comforting message. For behold, I will shake mine hand upon them. That's an interesting statement. I will shake mine hand upon them. And then we get this idea like an open, stretched out hand, but that's not what that means. I'll show you in a minute. And they shall be a spoil to their servants, and ye shall know that the Lord of hosts hath sent me. So this is an ancient way of cursing someone. It's likened to someone making a fist and shaking it against an enemy. And we've seen some of this lately. People taking their fists and shaking it, And notice that the Persians and all the enemies of Israel fall from within. I find that interesting as well. That the Babylonians and the Persians and everyone, the Greeks and even Rome, that if you study their histories, you'll find that they were weakened from within before they fell from without. Greece actually was divided into four empires. I can hopefully get it to you: Macedonia, Thracia, the Ptolemies, and the Seleucids, Syrian and Egypt. So you have the four divisions of Greece in it, and Alexander died. He actually died as a young man, and he died from his own corruption. Many people believe that he died an alcoholic, and he just got poisoned from it, and it killed him. Very interesting. So basically, Greece fell from within. Rome became very corrupted. Anybody knows any history about Rome knows that it was very corrupted and weakened before the barbarians came from the north and took it over. They should be a lesson that God will take care of a nation or an empire that rises up over his servants, and he will cause it to fall. And the thing is, many times empires corrupt themselves and weaken themselves, and then they just fall, and that's it. So it should be a lesson to all who withstand God's people and his word. So this is a comforting message once again Zechariah is giving them, and you wonder why he's giving it. Well, I'll talk about that in a moment. But look at verse 10. This is a beautiful verse that refers to the millennial reign of Christ. Sing and rejoice, O daughter of Zion, for lo, remember he said that in, let's see, we saw that, didn't we? Didn't we see that in verse 7? Is it verse 8? Okay.
Oh, Zion is in verse 7.
Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, I missed that. Okay, so let's go to verse 10. Sing and rejoice, O daughter of Zion, for lo, I come. I remember he said that once already. And it says, and I will dwell in the midst of thee, saith the Lord. So he says, I come. I will dwell in the midst of thee. He's already mentioned that once. And so this is a reference to the second coming of Christ. So I'd like to give you some amazing points concerning this verse. Christ is God. He is coming and dwelling among us. Notice he says, lo, I come. And of course, he's speaking, saith the Lord. So he is God. And he's coming and dwelling among us. Remember the name Emmanuel that's found in Isaiah 7:14? And the name Emmanuel means God with us. So he's coming as God to dwell in the midst of Jerusalem. And so what would this do? This would cause Israel to rejoice. His first coming did not cause the nation to rejoice. Notice it says, sing and rejoice, O daughter of Zion, for lo, I come. Now remember, Christ did come, his first coming, but the whole nation didn't rejoice. In fact, if anything, they wanted the leaders, they wanted to kill him. So they're not rejoicing there, obviously. Okay, but they will come for his second coming. They will rejoice. They will rejoice for his second coming. So they mostly miss the importance of his first coming. His second will be a deliverance, a salvation from destruction. And so verse 8 does refer to that. It does refer to a destruction, and the armies are going to try to destroy all the Jews. And the Bible talks about the Antichrist is going to try to destroy their seed in the book of Revelation. And really, that is what causes Christ to come, is the danger of the people. He says, enough is enough. I'm coming to rule and to reign. And so they're going to be very happy to see him because he's delivering them. And so those that are looking for his coming, and there will be Jews in that time who will be looking for his coming, and it will be a salvation from destruction. So they will sing, they will rejoice, O daughter of Zion. Let's talk about the nation. For lo, I come, and I will dwell in the midst of thee, saith the Lord. See that beautiful promise? He is coming. His coming is a promise. And when God says, I come and I will dwell in the midst of thee, that's a promise. And God cannot break his promises to anyone. It will not be broken. It cannot be broken. He will dwell in the midst of Israel forever. This will happen. He's going to dwell in the midst, and that hasn't happened yet. This is to be fulfilled. Therefore, so why was this there? And I believe this is the reason. Zechariah, God was using Zechariah to encourage the people, to show them that he had a plan in this rebuilt temple. So rebuild it, because God has a plan for the nation of Israel. And he did, and he does. So therefore, rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. God has a plan. He has a purpose for them. Does he still have a plan today? We think, oh, not today. This is the modern era. God has just kind of walked away from the world. Well, that's what the world would like you to think, but that's not true. God has a plan today, and we should be a part of his plan by standing for him. There's a verse in the book of Ephesians and says, and having done all to stand. So what should we do in this day? We should stand for him. We should not lose heart. So easy to lose heart. It's so easy. We look at the troubles of today and we think, oh no, is it worth it anymore? Well, that's how Zechariah felt. That's how the people felt in his day. And so they needed to stand and not lose heart. Because you see, Zechariah 2:10, it is yet to be fulfilled, but it will be fulfilled. Christ is coming. They're going to sing and rejoice. And he will dwell in the midst of them. It will happen, saith the Lord. It's a promise. So now we're looking at verse 11. And many nations shall be joined to the Lord in that day, and shall be my people, and I will dwell in the midst of thee, and thou shalt know that the Lord of hosts hath sent me unto thee. See that? So this is a further reference to the 1,000-year millennial reign of Christ. I believe it'll be a 1,000-year millennial reign of Christ. And notice that many nations have joined up with the Lord who is in the midst of Jerusalem. So this is yet to come. This has not happened. He's not dwelling today in the midst of Jerusalem. He dwelled in the midst of Jerusalem in Solomon's day, but still he was not proactive in the ruling of Jerusalem. His presence was there, and David was ruling, or Solomon was ruling, as king. And so that's a different thing. This is really what he's talking about is a future thing. Of course, not in Zechariah's day. He's not ruling in the midst of Jerusalem in his day. Even with the rebuilt temple, he's not going to be ruling in the midst of Jerusalem. This is a future fulfillment. This is yet to be fulfilled. And I want you to notice that there will be nations in that day. This is after the tribulation and everything. There will still be Gentile nations, and they will join up. Notice this, many nations shall be joined to the Lord in that day. I know we look at these things and we say, oh, this is impossible. Well, that's how they felt. And look what happened. So God can work these things out. He certainly can. And so, yes, there will be many nations who have joined with the Lord who's in the midst of Jerusalem. He's coming again. Christ will be in the midst of Jerusalem. This is a literal reign and should never be spiritualized. There are many that try to, but that's just corruption of Scripture. You're trying to living corrupt. Just wrong. In that day, all of Israel will recognize Christ is the sent one of Jehovah. Now, when we say Jehovah, the word Jehovah means the self-existing one, and it refers to the Father. All right, now let's look at verse 12. And the Lord shall inherit Judah, his portion in the Holy Land. Interesting phrase there, the Holy Land, and shall choose Jerusalem again. Now, you're going to be glad that you came to this Bible study now, because you're going to learn something brand new. Many times people refer to Israel as the Holy Land. I'm sure you've heard that. Next year, the Holy Land. A lot of people call Israel today the Holy Land. And that's okay, because that's what it is. This is the only time, though, the phrase the Holy Land is used in the Bible. You can look it up. Now, the word holy means, you will wonder, it means set apart for service. You can write that down. So every time you read the word holy, just think set apart for service. Something that God set apart for his service. That's what holy means. It means it's been earmarked only for God. And it is true that the land of Israel is set apart for God. It is holy. It is his land. Even now, Israel belongs to God. He has chosen it. And notice, he will choose Jerusalem again. And this works with verse 11, because in verse 11 he's saying, I will dwell in the midst of thee, and it is his land. It belongs to God. He has chosen it, and it is his headquarters. He will choose it again in Judah. Notice that. He makes it very clear. Notice it says, thou shalt inherit, and the Lord shall inherit what? Judah, his portion in the Holy Land. So he even sets apart, he wants you to see this clearly, that it is Jerusalem. Jerusalem is in Judah, and this will be his headquarters in the future. Once again, it's a clear reference to his millennial eternal reign. Nothing can stop him. It is his plan. And remember how chapter 2 began. Remember? The man has the measuring line. He's going to measure Jerusalem. Why is he doing that? Because it belongs to God. It's his land. It's his city. And so in verse 13, he gives a little warning there. He says, be silent, O all flesh. He knows that not everybody's going to accept this. He's not going to accept that this belongs to the Lord. The world will not accept it. They would hate that. It's their land as far as they're concerned, and Jerusalem is an international city. Well, it isn't. It belongs to God. And so he says, be silent, O all flesh, before the Lord, for he is raised up out of his holy habitation. And so this is a message to the enemies of Israel. This is a message to the enemies of God. They need to pause. Okay, before you start to rise up against the Lord, before you start to attack God, before you start to criticize him and go after his people, you need to pause. If you're listening to this Bible study tonight, you need to pause. You need to consider. You need to be afraid. If they stir up the Lord like a sleeping giant, they are truly in for trouble. Okay, this is what it's like. It's sort of the analogy is like God's this sleeping giant, and if they want to raise him up, then you just wait, because you sow the wind, you'll reap the whirlwind. Revelation 8:1. This is interesting. And when he had opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for the space of half an hour. And so that's interesting, because this is between a judgment, the sixth and seventh trumpet judgments. And what happens is there's this empty pause, the vacuum before the storm. And there's an awesome feeling that something great and terrible is about to happen. Something's going to happen. And so before that happens, there's this pause. There's this, be silent, O all flesh, before the Lord. This silence in heaven for the space of half an hour. I think that's between, sixth and seventh seal judgment. Okay. And then David put it this way. In my distress, I called upon the Lord and cried unto my God. He heard my voice out of his temple, and my cry came before him, even to his ears. Then the earth shook and trembled. The foundations also of the hills moved and were shaken, because he was wroth. There went up a smoke out of his nostrils, and fire out of his mouth devoured. Coals were kindled by it. He bowed the heavens also, and came down, and darkness was under his feet. So here you get this analogy of God coming down with anger because David was in distress, because he cried to the Lord, and the Lord heard his voice and came to his help, to be his help. And so we many times do not picture God in this light. We don't get this idea, but the Bible is filled with promises of protection for his people. And this is what we see. This is what the message of Zechariah is. This is this vision. He's saying, go build a temple. I'm going to protect you. If they harm you, they're sticking their finger in my eye, and I'm going to come down and I'm going to bring wrath. And then I want to tell you that someday the purpose of rebuilding the temple will build into this big glorious purpose of the coming one who will rule in Jerusalem, and he will dwell in the midst. And that's basically the message in a nutshell, is that he's gonna dwell in the midst, and he's going to rule from Jerusalem, and it's going to be so prosperous, and all these nations are going to flow, and he's going to make treaties with all these nations, and they will become his, and he will rule the world. And that is just, I mean, even now we think that is just too awesome to even imagine, but the Bible does tell us that this is going to happen. This is God's plan. We have a hard time seeing it now because we're living in a time before that, and there's going to be trouble before we can get to this plan, and it unfolds with blessing. But we need to hold on because God is unfolding his plan to bring forth the blessing. And so before you have blessing, you're going to have trouble, you're going to have conflict, and we need to stand in the conflict. And then very likely God's just going to take us, well, he's going to rapture us out of here, and the world's going to go through a terrible time. And I believe we're getting really close to that time. But I'm excited because I know that God is in control, and he has a plan, and it will be fulfilled. So next week we will see the fourth amazing vision of Zechariah, and it is amazing. It will have Joshua, the son of Josedek, which was the high priest at the time. There's some beautiful pictures here, symbolism. So if you'd like to read into chapter 3 next week, and then come back, we'll have that. If you're not able to make it next week, then we have this on. We'll have this recorded so that you can catch it when you get back. Okay, so that's it for tonight. So I'm going to take off the recording.